Welcome, fellow gamers, to another advanced character build for Dungeons & Dragons 5th Edition, where we break down the character builds used by veteran players who leverage their experience and knowledge of the game to create some of the most unique combination of skills, spells, and tactics for successful survivability into the higher levels. We give you a level-by-level overview of the skills, spells, and abilities, how to use them effectively, and then we deep dive into the play style and combat tactics used to make this build successful. If you'd like to support the channel, you can acquire a full PDF version of today's build to 20th level by visiting our shop at the Dungeon Masters Guild website. Link is in the description. And as always, be sure to like, share, subscribe, hit that notification bell, and let's get started. Today's build is the Hexblade Warlock Oathbreaker Paladin Multiclass, sometimes referred to as a hexadin, a darkness-shrouded melee necromancer, a mix of frontline fighter and half-caster relying on summoned minions and darkness-shrouded combat, whereas Devil's Sight gives him clear advantage against his foes. Leveraging Great Weapon Master and Sentinel feats in combination with the Pact of the Blade to trigger lots of bonus action attacks and no shortage of chances to land critical hits. Now, this build dominates by maintaining a steady flow of summoned minions with the ability to heal and bestow benefits through passive auras, with lots of utility designed to keep yourself and your undead army alive and shrouded in magical darkness. Geared more for damage dealing rather than damage absorption, it's best not to think of him as a tank, though he can certainly go toe-to-toe and has some incredible survivability skills. Now, this build is hard to learn and even harder to master, with lots of resource management and complex skill-spell combinations. Truly an advanced character build. Even at mid-level, the DeathKnight breaks down tactics into one of four categories: the Darkness Combat, Lifesteal Combat, Summoner Combat, and Summoner Lifesteal modes of play, depending on the situation, with the flexibility to move between them seamlessly each turn as the battlefield situation changes. Few builds have a source to steal life from their enemies and making you truly a hard target to kill. A build that thematically sits on the boundary between life and death. Now, the Hexblade DeathKnight is far from a one-trick pony, where despite that ambiguity of life or death, they function as the party face, whether through intimidation or persuasion, with a high charisma, adding role-playing opportunities off the battlefield. We have chosen a wide variety of summon options so as not to hinder the character if undead are not available. Fays, demons, and various charmable options mean you can always have summoned assistance regardless if you're raiding an undead temple or traveling the high seas. So how do we master such a complex build? Well, let's summon our resolve and dive in deep. So let's take a look at the pros and cons for this build. Now, we always use the point buy system to maintain consistency throughout our guides. Choosing the variant human race nets us the Great Weapon Master feat early. Now, though its usefulness isn't fully realized until about level 3, it makes more sense to acquire it before Sentinel. So we dip our two bonus stats into Charisma and Strength. Now, why Strength? Well, until we gain Hexblade and Pact of the Blade, we're going to have to rely on our strength modifiers for combat. And basically by 5th level is when everything is going to switch over to Charisma. So for our starting stats, we're going to start with Strength at 14, Dexterity at 10, Constitution at 14, we leave Intelligence as a dump stat at 8, we take 10 in Wisdom and 15 in Charisma. Adding in your bonus stats gives you a good starting point. Now, a special note on your racial proficiency. It really should match your choice or how you choose to play the party face. Intimidation or persuasion. Ultimately, it depends on your play style. I lean towards intimidation, but persuasion probably would have less negative effects should you roll poorly. You're going to be good at both, but obviously taking one as a proficiency is going to allow you to add that bonus. Now, where does this put us? So with a low dexterity, obviously we're a slave to the dice rolls on initiative. Being human and having a low wisdom and intelligence as a dump stat means we're susceptible to control type spells and damage that requires these saves. Now, our 15 foot of darkness centered on us can be a logistical issue for positioning around other party members, which is why we recommend casting it on your blade. That way you can sheath it as necessary. Now, Dungeon Masters will be watching this closely, especially as you start to tear through the mobs on the battlefield. At times, it can seem as though it takes you 2 rounds to come fully online, especially in the early levels, but this fades. Now, on the flip side, high damage weapon choice, potential for far more attacks per round than an average fighter of the same level, and the ability to steal life for increased survivability, an action and bonus action attack starting at level 1, kicked in reaction attacks with Sentinel by level 7, with lots of extra targets on the battlefield to aid you in crowd control and to burn through mobs quickly. This build is designed around that darkness combat with lots of opportunities to trigger Sentinel's reaction attacks. It makes very swift work, even against multiple targets. Now, darkness also benefits us outside of combat. By a unique use of positioning, you can cover down players, protect casters from ranged attacks, while moving in and out of combat, avoiding opportunity attacks by those who can't even see through your magical darkness. With a high charisma that gets used for your combat modifiers and open up opportunities to be the party face, it's a well-rounded character. One of the limitations of the Paladin class is the shallow spell slot pool from which to cast spells or power additional damage through Divine Smite. However, by adding a few Warlock levels, we greatly improve this pool of spell slots. Now, unlike most builds, you constantly need to decide which concentration spell to use, and it determines your tactics in large part. You will more often than not have one concentration spell live at any given time. Later, we discuss the 4 modes of combat in which concentration spell is key to its success. Now, your spell slots will be under constant pressure with Divine Smite, concentration options, and even spells based for attacks or curses. Regaining our spell slots after short rest does help in this respect from being a warlock, but you still burn through them quickly. Managing your summoner charred minions is also something that takes practice, and it is highly advised you come up with a solution for making this easier, whether that be tokens, cards, and of course, keeping our PDF guide handy for stat block references. Each minion has their own stat block. Some require bonus actions to command, others do not. Some can be commanded as a group with the use of a single command. Many have special abilities which can complement your combat tactics, while others are useful for out-of-combat situations. Being familiar with each and the conditions required to summon or charm them is key. You also have auras and spells which grant them benefits, and that also needs to be tracked. Now, we have included many stat blocks within our guide, but note, there will be times you may not know the stats of your minion depending on the spell or skill that you're using. Keeping them close to you during darkness combat is going to be key for triggering Sentinel's opportunity attacks, which at times can conflict with crowd control options. With this build, practice makes perfect. DeathKnight breaks down combat tactics into 4 modes: Darkness, Lifesteal, Summoner, and Summoner Lifesteal modes. They are easy to move between each turn depending on battlefield situation or the DeathKnight's health requirements. Once you understand what you can summon, what you can charm, what can be stacked and what cannot, you're a very formidable target with high survivability and incredible damage output. Now, abilities and spells will come online at various levels, and our level-by-level guide breaks this down and shows you when each combination is live. So let's take a quick look at each one. So for the Darkness combat mode, using our Pact weapon linked to our Charisma modifiers, we leverage Great Weapon Master Feats -5 to hit, +10 to damage ability, while striving for critical hits or deaths on our main attack to trigger the feat's bonus action attack. Now we pair this with the concentration spell Darkness cast on our blade. This grants us advantage to all attack rolls versus mobs in melee range who cannot see in magical darkness, while simultaneously putting them at disadvantage to attack rolls. Any mob trying to cast spells or use a ranged from outside your Aura of Darkness will also be at disadvantage, and any spell requiring sight won't even function. Now, Divine Smite works on the main attack as well as the bonus attack. Any mob attempting to move out of melee range within your darkness, even with a disengage, will trigger a Sentinel feat reaction attack. Now, we can leverage Green Flame Blade if fighting multiple targets, or Booming Blade to trigger damage for mobs that choose to move out of your darkness. Great Weapon Master applies when using spells like these, as it does not depend on you using the attack action to trigger. So using these cantrips to kick off a melee attack will, however, not allow you to use the Eldritch Invocation Thirsting Blade, which we get at level 8, which grants us a second attack, but only if we're using the attack action. So prior to level 8, use of Booming Blade and Green Flame Blade are better options, but once Thirsting Blade is online, you may only use those cantrips in certain situations. Now looking at the Summoner combat mode, it uses all the Darkness combat mode, but includes the use of summon minions aiding you in battle. Now it's limited to your skill-based summon minions and a previously used Animate Dead, as your concentration will be reserved for the Darkness spell. So this tactic can have minions raised with our Eldritch Invocation, Undying Servitude, Animate Dead, or Channel Divinity's Control Undead, or a zombie that's raised via Finger of Death. All are benefiting from our auras if you keep them within 10 feet of you as you move about the battlefield. Since you're covered in darkness, anything you engage with will have to deal with you and your entourage. Any attack against them instead of you triggers the Sentinel Feats reaction attack, as does attempting to move out of melee range with you in darkness. Now, as an alternative in this mode, you can maximize your summoned army. Now, it doesn't allow you to use the darkness spell because of concentration, but allows you to have lots of extra allies on the battlefield while allowing you the freedom of some combat. In this mode, you can still use Great Weapon Master, have all the benefits of any non-concentration spells, and can use those to buff and heal your army. You don't even need to engage in melee combat. This mode pairs very well with ranged combat. It assumes that our concentration spell is taken by a spell summoned or charmed mob, either through Crown of Madness, Summon Shadow Spawn, Summon Fae, or Greater Demon. Only one of these can be live at any given time, but they can be paired and stacked with Animate Dead, Control Undead, Create Undead, Finger of Death, Accursed Spectre, Negative Energy Floods Zombie, and Charm Monster. Yes, your DM is going to hate you. Now, let's take a look at the Lifesteal combat mode. It's designed to heal us as needed. If our health is low, we default to this combat mode. It utilizes our Hexblade Curse, Vampiric Touch, and Innervation, or Innervation. Because Vampiric Touch and Innervation are concentration, melee, or ranged spells, we use these instead of the Darkness spell. Vampiric Touch is a spell attack designed for melee range, does necrotic damage, and heals you for half the damage given. As long as you maintain concentration on that spell, you can make an attack each round and heal yourself. Now, Innervation is just a ranged version of this. Additionally, if the target has your Hexblade Curse on it and dies, you'll also gain health from that. It's a good tactic to reserve Hexblade Curse, as it is a bonus action for this purpose. Once your healing is complete, you can switch back into another mode. Now, finally, we have the Summoner Lifesteal Combination combat mode. And it combines some of the elements of a summoned horde while reserving your concentration spell and action for dealing damage that heals you. Simply Vampiric Touch for melee range and Innervation for ranged attacks that heal you are also concentration-based, which rules out the use of Crown of Madness, Summon Shadow Spawn, Summon Fae, or Greater Demon. However, you can still have summoned or charmed allies via Animate Dead, Control Undead, Create Undead, Finger of Death, Accursed Spectre, Negative Energy Flood Zombie, and Charm Monster. Staying out of traditional combat and reserving your action to do damage that heals also means that your chances to use spell-based support to your army will be somewhat limited to bonus actions or non-concentration spells. But all in all, those are the modes of combat for this build. So for breaking down the summoning tactics, managing a small cadre of minions is a bit more work than most players have to deal with. And there are a few things you can do so you're not scatterbrained trying to keep track of your own bonus actions, reactions, and your summoned as well. We have included the stat blocks in our guide so you have the information readily available. Sometimes your summoned minions will have their own initiative, some will go after your turn. Some can be commanded for free, some have special attacks, and some require use of an action or a bonus action. Some will stick around for 24 hours, others you may have to recast the spell to continue controlling them. Managing your summoned minions really opens up your ability in crowd control, maximizing the triggering of Sentinel attacks of opportunity or acting as a damage over time. I find using tokens, homemade stack cards, and even our guide is helpful. Commanding multiple mobs using a single bonus action as an attack, such as attack my target or defend me, are helpful as they will continue with that order as long as you are engaged with a mob and freeze future bonus actions for other things. In the same respect, guard me or another party member, place, or object are also options that limit the use of bonus action commands. You'll notice that we've sprinkled in some undead, non-undead options as you can't guarantee access to undead or humanoid targets. And in cases such as these, you still want to be able to summon up a demon or a fae. Killing a mob and controlling him to then attack his enemies is family fun for everyone. We hope you've enjoyed this overview of an advanced character build for Dungeons & Dragons. You can support the channel by grabbing the PDF version of this build with more in-depth detail and a full level-by-level guide to 20th level. Its link is in the description. A great companion to use as you level your own Paladin Sorcerer. If you have an idea for a basic build and want us to supercharge it, let us know. And as always, be sure to like, share, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss any advanced character builds for Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition in the future. And we will see you next time.